Mike Silagadze is the founder and CEO of ether.fi, a new player in the Ethereum staking space. Ether.fi allows stakers to control their keys while delegating their stake. A reminder that Ethereum now runs on proof of stake, which requires users to deposit or stake their ETH. Ethereum's Shapella upgrade introduced the ability for early stakers to withdraw their ETH, which made Ethereum staking and projects around it one of the hottest themes in crypto this year. Tokens that function as a receipt of staked ETH, called liquid staking tokens, grew in popularity, as did concerns about centralization. We will begin our conversation with an introduction to ether.fi, followed by their differentiation in an already competitive liquid staking sphere.
I'll start maybe by saying I think lots of people have built really cool things in the liquid staking space, and we're fans of most of the protocols that are out there. It's not that we're necessarily looking to replace what's out there. I just think there's a need for a new category of staking in a variety of ways that we're hoping to fill. Specifically, what makes EtherFi unique in the liquid staking world? There's two major things. The first is that EtherFi is the only protocol where the stakers get to retain control of their keys. In other protocols, you are effectively ceding control of your ETH. Certainly, if you're staking, with Coinbase or Binance or anywhere else, you are fully giving up custody without any hope of control, which I think is generally a bad idea, frankly. But even with other protocols, there's a level of trust that you're placing on node operators in particular, and even in some cases on the protocol itself. Whereas with EtherFi, you hold the keys. So if the protocol gets hacked or if the node operators, get in trouble with the SEC or whatever happens, you as a staker can always get your ETH back because you hold the keys. So I think that's a pretty important difference. It's one of these things that every time there's a blow up, every few months in crypto, people remember why we're doing this thing in the first place. So which is, it's all about decentralization. The second big difference is that EtherFi is a composable protocol, composable in the sense that it's designed to facilitate things like restaking or building on top of using it, a variety of ways, which I think is going to become more and more critical in the staking universe. I think certainly there's concerns and things to figure out on how to make that safe and secure, but we're seeing, for example, staking yields starting to come down as more ETH is staked. We're seeing about 50,000 ETH a day getting staked net, which is a lot. And the result is now staking yields are below 4% in most cases. And that'll only accelerate, right? I think more ETH is going to be staked. And so if that doubles, triples, quadruples, ETH staking rewards, native staking rewards are going to drop below 1% at some point. Layer twos are going to be more efficient with the various EIPs that are in flight. So that means less gas will be used, which means, less staking rewards. So I do think there is going to be a need in order to ensure that Ethereum stays secure to provide other revenue streams to stakers. And that's a thing that EtherFi is really focused on. I think we're the only ones that are specifically focused on it that way. And one of the things we've done, hopefully we'll talk about later, is launch this new layer on top of EtherFi called EtherFan, which is an NFT layer that sort of gamifies and creates a loyalty rewards program on top of Ethereum staking, which we're really excited about.
Very cool. To backtrack even further, for those who are listening who may not know exactly what staking or like liquid staking is, could you provide an overview of this space? Like what is liquid staking?
I'll start with this. So Bitcoin obviously was the first blockchain in some ways. And it's proof of work, which is a fancy way of saying that you have thousands of computers all over the world guessing random numbers. If one of them guesses correctly, they get 10 Bitcoin, roughly. And that happens every 10 or 12 minutes. That's proof of work. That has some benefits, but also a lot of issues. It obviously is hugely expensive in terms of energy. Ethereum started as proof of work and then migrated to proof of stake. Proof of stake is a different consensus mechanism where people who run those computers that run the blockchain, there's I think about 6,000 machines out there that run Ethereum. In order to have the right to run one of these validators, you have to put your ETH at stake. So specifically, you have to put 32 ETH up. You have to put it at stake in order to have the right to run one of these validators, thereby attesting to blocks and in certain instances putting together these blocks yourself that constitute transactions on the network. So the benefit is that you put this ETH at stake and you get a share of effectively transaction fees on the network. The risk you take on, which is to say you're putting your ETH at stake, is if you do something bad, if you vote in such a way that it's, let's say, malicious, or you go offline, your ETH gets penalized. So it gets slashed in various ways. There's, again, pros and cons to anything, but one of the benefits is this is several orders of magnitude more energy efficient. In some ways, I think many people, including myself, would argue it actually is better for decentralization because it creates more of a level playing field that allows anybody to, with a Raspberry Pi to validate blocks on Ethereum.
And Raspberry Pi is a hardware.
Yes, sorry. That's a very small, very cheap computer. You don't need, millions of dollars to mining equipment and contracts with, an oil producer that's off-gassing, whatever. That's kind of the proof of work world. It's very expensive, prohibitively expensive, which is why a handful of mining pools control the vast majority of Bitcoin network power. Okay, so now the drawback of staking is you lock up your 32 ETH. If you just do it kind of in default sort of naive way, you just lock up your ETH and you run your server. Your ETH is now inaccessible to you in a sense. You can't do anything else with it. That's kind of intentional. That was what Vitalik and the gang, so to speak, intended. But the challenge for that obviously is if you don't have $50,000 worth of ETH, and if you don't want to lock up your ETH, that creates a bit of a disincentive from staking. And so protocols, smart contracts, basically have been built to facilitate delegation of staked ETH. Specifically, ETH holders can delegate their ETH to node operators who then run the actual servers and do the work of validating and securing Ethereum. And in exchange for that, in some cases, in some of these protocols, you can get basically a receipt token, which can take a variety of forms, but you get a receipt token that is your liquid staked ETH. It's liquid in the sense that that token is, liquid. You can do stuff with it. You can borrow against it. You can, potentially restake it eventually to earn additional fees on it. You can take leverage. You can do whatever you want with it. So that has encouraged, I think, a lot more ETH to be staked. I think if it was not the case for liquid staking protocols, you would have a lot less ETH staked and a lot less of it staked on chain, and almost all of it would be staked in centralized entities like Binance and Coinbase, which I think would be objectively worse. So even though it's sort of circumventing the intention of Ethereum, which was that you do in fact lock up your ETH, I think it's a net benefit. I think liquid staking protocols are a net benefit to the ecosystem.
In EtherFi, ETH holders are able to stake their ETH and effectively delegate that ETH for EtherFi to run it, to use it to validate Ethereum, the Ethereum chain, and in exchange, those ETH holders get a receipt of the ETH that they trusted to EtherFi to operate or to stake.
That's almost entirely correct. The one piece is that we don't actually run the servers. So node operators run the servers. We have a mix of trusted and trustless node operators. So large players like Finoa and DSRV, which are very large node operators. But also we have trustless node operators that are just literally people in their homes with small computers that are plugged into EtherFi and then run these nodes. So it's not us. We are just building the smart contracts and facilitating this marketplace, so to speak, between stakers and people who want to run nodes.
How many node operators do you have in your network now?
So we launched, I mean, we're a very new protocol. We only launched a few months ago, two months ago, I guess. We launched with, I want to say, 6 node operator partners, trusted node operators. And then in addition, we have recently started what we call Operation Solo Staker, which is a program to connect small node operators, meaning people in their homes or small offices with individual computers, to stakers on EtherFi. So we've got now 12 of those that we've launched. We've deliberately kept it to 12, in addition to those 6 trusted node operators. So for example, the solo stakers, I think we launched the first Ethereum node in Guatemala, and a handful of other places. Our goal is to, I can talk about issues with centralization in Ethereum, but our goal is to create a lot more very distributed nodes rather than having a lot of Ethereum nodes sitting in a handful of data centers.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk about the centralization issue. So, and by the way, I want to point out that one of the 12 solo stakers is the video producer of the Defiant, head of video Alp.
That's right, yeah.
We have a node in Amsterdam as well, thanks to him. and yeah, we'll be doing a whole video on his experience with solo staking. So stay tuned for that. Okay, and then just like wrapping up on just like the basics of EtherFi. So are ETH holders able to stake less than 32 ETH, or is that multiple still required?
So we have a multi-phase roadmap currently, like this second. It has to be multiples of 32 ETH because we're only at our phase 1 launch. In 2 weeks, I don't know when this podcast airs, so maybe it'll already be we'll already be out by then. Today
is June 14th, by the way.
So by the end of June, people will be able to stake fractional amounts of ETH. We're going to be releasing EtherFan, which is our gamified staking project, and that'll allow people to stake as little as 0.1 ETH. Or as much as they want.
And then what's the token that the liquid staking token that ETH holders get in exchange?
In the next few weeks, so when we launch EtherFan, they will get an NFT. And that NFT is, it has the typical sort of NFT picture associated with it. It'll probably be a wizard type character that has attributes related to the staked ETH. And that NFT is tradable. It is also burnable. You can always burn the NFT to get your ETH back out. But that's the token that you'll get. In phase 2, which will be in a few months from now, we will also have the option to mint a liquid, just a generic, ERC20 liquid staking token. It'll be called EETH. Technically, EETH will actually be out by the end of June, but it won't be directly accessible to the public. That'll happen, as I said, in a few months.
Super interesting to go with kind of this NFT first, and then ERC20 token, and yeah, let's get into that in a little bit. Arch is a crypto asset management platform that helps you maximize returns with diversified and gas-efficient investment strategies. Chasing yield doesn't pay off. Instead, the Arch Token Classification Standard, or ATCS, maps and classifies crypto assets to give you the best of Web3 in 7 products grouped by 3 categories: yield-bearing, index-style, and risk-adjusted portfolios. Learn more at the link on the description. I want to go back to the issue of centralization. So, this has been, like I mentioned at the start of the conversation, one of the biggest issues around liquid staking. The fact that so much ETH is concentrated in very few parties. Most of it is between Lido and Coinbase. This kind of goes against the entire purpose of proof of stake. Like proof of stake, as you said, is supposed to lower the barriers of entry for anyone to be a validator for Ethereum, because all you need is ETH. Like you don't need hardware equipment like in proof of work. But if everyone has delegated their ETH to a couple of parties, then that's that's counter to the whole point. So, how to move forward from here? What can ETH holders do? And I mean, do you see things potentially getting better?
I for sure think they'll get better. I think they will get better. Almost no question about that. Let me talk briefly about because decentralization, first of all, is a spectrum, right? Like nothing. It's very hard to just day one you launch and magically you're sort of everywhere, and there's no single points of failure. So I think that's important to acknowledge that you can't go from zero to perfection. There's always an intermediate state, and that's okay, and that's normal. That being said, I think centralization Ethereum is a challenge at a number of different levels. One of the things that I don't see talked about as much, and it's I think terrifying is probably not too strong a word, is the concentration of nodes. I mean, this is why we launched Operation Solo Staker, because if you look at Ethereum nodes, first of all, about half of them are in the US. And okay, that's fine, right? It makes sense to have nodes in the US. But out of those, a majority are in a single data center. There's one data center in Virginia. It's the Amazon's US East 1 data center. And that it represents a huge chunk of the Ethereum network. And it also, almost hilariously, is 20 minutes from the White House or the CIA headquarters. I know it could be anywhere. That it could be in Alaska. It would be the same problem. But there's just something aesthetically kind of unpleasant about, a third of the Ethereum network sitting in one data center, with the CIA, right there. So that's a problem. Then there's another huge data center in Europe. Hetzner, I think, is the one that runs that one. And Ethereums oftentimes have been very smug. Some of them with respect to other blockchains, right? At some point, Solana, I think, had a third of their network drop out because a data center or a cloud provider, decided to ban crypto, and Ethereum's kind of sat back and said, "Ha ha! Look at Solana." Made all kinds of jokes about Sequolana, and felt smug and superior. If a backhoe tractor cuts a fiber line to that one data center in the US, a third of Ethereum goes down, and then it wouldn't be so smug, and then you'd have tens of millions of dollars in slashed ETH as a result. So that's one problem, is there's just not enough distribution of nodes. They're all in a handful of places. And it's not that it's not that people are jerks and they're deliberately sitting there being like, how can I screw the Ethereum network? It's that there's actually advantages to putting your nodes where a lot of other nodes are, right? If you're doing any kind of MEV stuff, if you're doing maximum extractable value, where you're doing effectively sandwiching or front running transactions on Ethereum to make more money, it makes sense. You want to be where other nodes are because you need lower latency. But these incentive structures lead to more centralization, and so it's important for the Ethereum community to counterbalance that. And one of the things that we're doing that I think is pretty exciting is this Operation Solo Staker, where we basically pair up people that are willing to run nodes because they're big, Ethereum, supporters, with people that have ETH, combined with DVT technology from one of our partners, Obel, that allows you to safely delegate to individual node operators by splitting up the validator keys. And we've had, I think, close to over 1,000 people apply wanting to be node operators. So there's unlimited demand. We can literally replace almost restart the entire Ethereum network just off of these solo operators with nodes in their houses and offices, which is our intention. We want to launch a few thousand additional nodes next year that will dramatically shift the balance in terms of where Ethereum is run. And part of that is just aligning kind of incentives to make it attractive, I guess, financially for people to do that. The other area of centralization that I think is everyone kind of acknowledges and thinks about as being problematic is there's obviously the most popular staking protocol, liquid staking protocol called Lido. They've got 10 or $12 billion of ETH. I think about a third of all ETH staked. One can look at it two ways. On the one hand, if you think about it, well, if Lido didn't exist, that ETH would probably still be staked, but it would be staked, through Coinbase or whatever, or Binance, which I think is worse. But on the flip side, you really don't want effectively one handful of upgradable smart contracts to control that much ETH. Because if the 4 or 5 people that control the supply of the the LDO token, for whatever reason, get compromised or are caught in a room together, someone could literally force an upgrade of the contract and cause a lot of trouble. I mean, the odds of that happening obviously are low, and I'm sure they're aware of that risk, and et cetera, et cetera. But I think there are lots of valid reasons why people are worried about that much concentration in a single protocol. I think that as more ETH gets staked and the yields come down, because the way the math works is there's a certain amount of ETH distributed to stakers. If the amount of ETH staked doubles or triples or quadruples, then effectively staking rewards go down by 75%. That is going to force people to other protocols that facilitate other sources of revenue. Obviously not just EtherFi, but I think there will be other options out there for people to look at. So I think naturally the network will kind of tend towards more decentralization just from economic incentives.
But what if Lido also starts doing restaking?
So the most popular, or the only restaking platform that's working on getting to mainnet is called EigenLayer, and they are working with Lido. The nature of the way it's designed requires a lot of complexity in restaking staked ETH, STETH, the Lido liquid staking token. I think a more native kind of integration is likely to win because it requires a lot less complexity and doesn't require effectively setting up almost like a meta network on top of it to facilitate that. That's probably not super clear, but I also don't want to get into the weeds from a technical standpoint.
Okay, so you're betting that EigenLayer, which is going to be, I guess, like partnering with Lido to do their restaking.
Yeah, and others as well.
Okay, so like the bet is like their solution is maybe a bit complex, and so some users might want other solutions, other restaking solutions, and that might lead to more decentralization?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think a lot of people have expressed concerns and articulated very reasonable risks around restaking. Vitalik published kind of an indirect description of some of those risks recently, and Justin Drake has talked about it. Lots of folks have talked about it, and I completely agree and understand those risks. But I think it's going to happen because the economic incentives are there, and therefore it is going to happen. And I also think it helps. There are many ways in which restaking helps decentralize the network. Among other things, it makes running solo nodes more profitable because currently a node operator makes about, if they're running nodes on behalf of someone else's ETH, they're making about $10 to $15 a month per validator, which is not a ton of money. If you get 5 or 6 validators, maybe it's just enough to kind of keep them break even at least. But with restaking, I think that and if staking rewards come down, obviously that gets more challenging. But with restaking, it actually makes it more profitable to run those nodes, and therefore it makes sense for people to run nodes that are more geographically distributed, rather than having to have tens of thousands of validators in big centralized node operators. So I think restaking can actually help with decentralization. And to your point, for sure, I'm sure Lido will get in on that, and so others. But I think Lido they were the first ones to launch, and so the protocol is designed in a certain way, in a very specific way that I think makes it difficult to facilitate, makes it more challenging from a technical standpoint to facilitate restaking and other sort of feeding in other revenue streams. Can
you explain how restaking works? I guess like would be specific to EtherFi because like it might be different for others.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to talk about it. I'll probably do a poor job. I think it's better to get Sriram from Eigenlayer to come down and talk about it, but I can do my best. The goal of restaking is to broaden the reach of Ethereum's trust security mechanism to things beyond just Ethereum. Specifically, could be other chains, could be other services that require active validation. Could be a variety of other things. So you basically take this, if you're booting up a new blockchain, it would be really nice if you didn't have to start from zero, if you could effectively kind of bootstrap off of the security layer that's provided by Ethereum and get your blockchain launched. That way your blockchain is secure and Ethereum accrues some value as a result of that, accrues some value in exchange for for providing that layer of security. The way that is accomplished, or one way to accomplish that, is to create what's called, or what might be called, a programmable slashing mechanism. So I said that if you're running an Ethereum node and you misbehave, you double sign a block, or you do bad stuff, the ETH that you have staked gets slashed. So you lose money if you do that, and you don't want to obviously do that. Well, there's only a very specific set of things that you get slashed for. But if you take your withdrawal credentials, the address to which the ETH comes back to if you unstake it, and instead of pointing it to your wallet, you point it to a set of smart contracts that can then, in a programmatic way, slash your ETH. And if you misbehave by using that validator to run other services and not perform those duties. So if you're validating another blockchain and then you do something bad with that blockchain, then this ETH that you have staked gets slashed. So you're effectively kind of restaking it. You're staking it to validate Ethereum, and then you're kind of restaking it by redirecting it through these other smart contracts. For you're restaking it to validate this other blockchain or other service. So you can imagine building up this multitude of layers. So for a given validator, it could be validating 10 different things and getting paid for each of those things that it's doing. So it's easy to imagine why that can be lucrative, because you can build a variety of services now on top of Ethereum, and it ultimately accrues value to ETH, which is very powerful and exciting. And again, it's just going to happen because economically the incentive is there. But it's also probably not hard to imagine, well, this introduces a lot of risk, because now if you're validating all these other things, you're creating sort of conflicting forces on the servers, the validators themselves, that might get pulled in different directions. And if a particular a service that you're validating becomes really large, it could actually almost like create a undue pressure on even the social consensus of the Ethereum community, where, let's say, there's a really big blockchain that's being run this way, and the blockchain blows up, then it creates pressure on Ethereum to roll it back or do something that effectively roll back or fork in order to save this other service that was never part of Ethereum core to begin with.
That's Vitalik's argument.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. He said it in a much better way and had a lot more nuance and detail to it. But that's the basic idea. That's the danger of restaking. And I think that's valid.
So you create these layers. What if you get slashed on one of the top layers? Does that slashing just cascade down to Ethereum? Does the validator just lose?
Well, it slashes your ETH. It slashes your particular staked ETH. So I guess it does cascade down to Ethereum, but it only affects you directly. Or if there's a restaking protocol and it's somehow pooled, then obviously it would impact that entire pool.
Okay, but what if, say, a large percentage of Ethereum validators are restaking their ETH into one protocol because, I don't know, it became super popular and everyone's getting their yield through there, but then something happens, I don't know, maybe protocol gets hacked, or maybe there's a huge price volatility. Something happens that protocol that all of these stakers get slashed there, but then it would also affect Ethereum itself. Like, what happens if just like a large number of Ethereum validators get slashed? I mean, that makes ETH less secure, right?
No, because that ETH doesn't leave Ethereum. It doesn't even necessarily lead to have that ETH leave the staked ETH. In and of itself, that's not bad. Like, even if 1 million ETH gets slashed through restaking, in and of itself, like, that's okay, that's fine, right? Like, you took a risk, and now you pay the penalty if that risk goes badly. There's nothing inherently problematic about that. The problems, I mean, there's a variety of problems one can imagine, and as a result, one can imagine solutions to these problems. But one of the worst things that might happen is that that creates pressure. Maybe all these validators then apply pressure. They start emailing Vitalik and knocking on his door or whatever, and say, "Hey, dude, come on, you got to fork the chain. You got to fork the chain. We lost all this money." So that Vitalik, I think, even outlined a scenario where kind of a scenario where that might happen. So that's just something that needs to be kept in mind.
But beyond kind of this like social consensus risk, ETH itself doesn't leave Ethereum.
No, I mean, it's ETH. It doesn't. It's not like it magically vaporizes.
But I mean, no. Yeah, no. I mean, like, it doesn't leave. It continues to be staked on Ethereum.
It depends how it's designed, but yeah, generally speaking, it's going to continue to be staked. It's just the claim on that ETH gets sort of transferred somewhere else. Could be any number of places. I would say the design space around these things and what people are imagining here. I almost don't want to say this, but like 99, I guess this is the thing with like tail risk. 99.9% of cases, like, it's totally fine, it's going to work, and there's really not any real danger there. But there are like edge cases where it could create real issues for Ethereum, especially if there's a runaway effect. I mean, one example, I guess, and this also shows that I actually think a lot of the risks that are discussed about restaking are almost not just inherent to restaking, they're inherent to anything that gets very large on Ethereum. And one example I'll give is, USDC and USDT. Imagine there's a dispute, and the Shapella fork was an example of that in a sense. It wasn't disputed, but like, there was proof of work Ethereum that continued running for like 5 minutes. And imagine USDC and USDT said, no, we're only honoring redemptions on proof of work Ethereum. You guys, you can go do your proof of stake thing. That's cool. But we're going to honor redemptions on proof of work. I don't know that proof of stake takes off. I think you have then a legitimate fork. You would have two versions of Ethereum. I mean, it's also not hard to imagine that proof of stake just fails and like fizzles out if that was the case. Now, they didn't do that because rationally proof of stake made sense, but that's kind of an obvious thought experiment. It would be hard to imagine anybody disputing what I'm describing. In case USDT and USDC said that they were only honoring redemptions on proof of work. So that just shows, okay, yeah, like that those two protocols, those two projects have a massive amount of power on Ethereum. If there's a fork, if there's some other dispute, who knows about what, and again, imagine USDT chooses one and USDC chooses the other, Ethereum's forked. You're going to have both of those systems running, in perpetuity, and unless they reconcile. So if you kind of boil down the issues around like restaking and the concerns that exist there, you kind of realize like it actually applies to anything that gets really big, right? Lido is huge. If Lido gets hacked and suddenly a third of ETH is in the hands of some hacker, like, you don't think Ethereum gets forked? For sure it'll get forked, because that literally the network blows up if a third of ETH is in the hands of a single hacker. So I think the issues of restaking are legitimate and serious, but they actually apply. Most of the concerns actually apply to anything that gets very big.
Parcel, the decentralized real estate trading platform, is making it easier to get exposure to global real estate. Through city indices, you can trade the price change of popular US cities and easily access over 5 million properties with just a few clicks. With leverage up to 10x, you can go long or short and begin trading real estate in ways you never have before. Join today to start building a diversified real estate portfolio. So, back to the original question, which was like how to reduce staking, centralization. You mentioned solo staking is one, then having just financial incentives to use your ETH in other protocols and like Lido and Coinbase and Binance with restaking. Do you think is that kind of the main pathways that ETH holders have to reducing centralizations, or do you see other ones?
I think those are big ones. Like getting more nodes spun up in other regions is a huge one. I think that it doesn't get talked about enough because it's like there's no token to gamble on, so to speak. So again, it's one of these things that's sort of like plumbing, and like you don't notice plumbing until your plumbing stops working, and then you really notice it. So I worry about plumbing, and so I think getting nodes spun up in other regions is really, really critical. And then for sure, this is never going to happen. But even if Lido just sort of like split and said, look, we're going to split into 5 protocols, I'm just going to associate, just split the ETH in 5 and divide it up, and they'll have their own dev teams. That would be a huge thing for decentralization. Obviously, that's not going to happen for a lot of different reasons. It's almost impossible to do it logistically. But I'm actually less worried about that because I really think there's enough innovation happening in the liquid staking and staking space that the market will naturally shift, right? Like there's been a huge influx of ETH into Rocket Pool, which I think probably not controversial to say it's a much more decentralized liquid staking protocol. And so Lido's been basically flat in terms of market share. I think even slightly declining. And then I think what we're doing is pretty interesting. And, I don't want to announce anything prematurely, but there's going to be a lot of ETH coming our way for a lot of different reasons. So, so I think that natural market forces are going to, lead to decentralization. And a lot of the bigger players, especially the young whippersnapper players in the space, really care about decentralization and are designing with that. Kind of from first principles, and that includes us, Rocket Pool, Stakewise, Puffer is doing really cool stuff where it's like hardware. It's like a hardware security layer on staking keys. To name a few, there's a lot of people who are doing really cool stuff that I think will naturally lead to more decentralization.
Yeah, I hope so. Going back to one of the other key points you mentioned as differentiating EtherFi, the ability for users to hold their own keys. How are you targeting this to like more technical users, or are you designing this in a way where it's easy to recover those keys, or how are you dealing with kind of the security layer for storing keys?
Yeah, that's an important question. I'll say that there's going to be different types of users on EtherFi. From the perspective of a non-technical user that doesn't care about key storage and doesn't want to deal with any of this complexity, they can go to EtherFi or EtherFan and mint an NFT or get a liquid staking token, and they don't need to think about that. They just deposit their 0.1 ETH, get their receipt token, and call it a day. And then they're just accruing rewards. So, and I think that'll be the majority of users. So the majority of users won't need to deal with any complexity having to do with key management. That capability is available it's available to anyone, but it's available to sort of the base layer of stakers who are actually minting full validators and are willing to take both the risk and some of the benefit of having to manage the security of keys. So everybody else kind of piggybacks off of the probably a small percentage of power users, stakers, who are going to be holding and managing keys. I happily go into the weeds of how the key storage stuff does, but lots of layers of encryption and security, and the smart contract mechanism that we have makes it so that even if the keys get compromised, it's actually not the end of the world, because you're holding it's really your wallet, your withdrawal safe, that is like the thing that lets you get your ETH back. There's a variety of ways to recover in different scenarios. So I think we're pretty comfortable with that. But the main thing is, like, the average user shouldn't care and won't have to care. But there are power users that will be responsible for ensuring that everybody else stays secure.
Okay, and then let's talk about EtherFans, like this NFT and like alternative governance model that you're building.
Yeah, I think it's a very unique and different thing that hasn't existed before. There are lots of motivations for it, and I hope it becomes more popular, because I think it's better than a lot of traditional models that have become popular. So maybe I'll start by describing what it is, and then I'll explain like what are some interesting properties about it. From the perspective of a user, the way it would work is you go to ether.fan, so you can kind of see a theme developing. We're launching new products. It'll be ether.something. And we'll certainly launch other products, so that creates sort of the brand alignment across all these things. So a user goes to ether.fan, they stake some amount of ETH, any 0.1 or more, and that deposit is then staked through EtherFi, and they get basically a wrapper around that deposit that is represented with an NFT, and the NFT has all the usual NFT provably rare character traits. So let's say it's a wizard, which is the character that we're kind of arbitrarily choosing. Actually, we ran a vote, and the wizard is the one people like the most. So it's a wizard character. It's got special hat, hair, and a scepter, blah blah, all the usual stuff. But in addition, the character can be upgraded by staking more ETH into it, and then the flare around that character, which are basically little floating ETHs in the background, change that represent how much ETH is staked in that character. So at any given time, that character can, you start at 1 ETH and then grow it all the way up to, 1 million ETH if you want, or any arbitrary amount. And in addition, this character accrues loyalty points. So the longer you stake, the higher, the more loyalty points you have, and therefore the higher the membership tier, which means the higher share of protocol revenue you get. To sort of tease the governance model, it's structured much more like a cooperative rather than a sort of securitized, governance token voting thing that most other protocols use. So you're coming in with sort of a contribution, and you're contributing your labor, so to speak, your stake, and in exchange, you're getting a share of the protocol revenues, which is the standard kind of cooperative model. I think this is a fun way to encourage people to think long term, because the longer you stake, the more valuable your membership becomes, and it also encourages people to maintain their ETH stake, because it's associated with this character that they've built up and and potentially grown attached to. So we're pretty excited about it. And this isn't there yet, but the plan is to then involve these characters, these membership cards, so to speak, in the governance of the entire protocol. So that to vote on proposals or to make proposals, to elect the governing board of the protocol, you use these characters, these membership cards that you've been holding. So that's kind of the idea. I think it's novel in a number of different ways. One, it really is at the intersection of DeFi and NFTs, the category that's kind of known as NFT-fi. So it hopefully finds an audience among people that are interested in NFTs, but they're, let's say, less interested in just gambling on monkey pictures, and more interested in utility, the utility that you could get around these things. But at the same time, it has this fun kind of gamification element that we'll continue, building on. That maybe also appeals to people that are interested in the, let's say, some of the more speculative stuff around NFTs. And the governance model, I think, is, there's a lot of challenges with DAOs. I think, my opinion, this is not I don't think this is a mainstream opinion, but is that the standard governance model of DAOs is just bad. The standard sort of system or structure that people have settled on is you have a DAO entity, and then you've got a foundation, and then you have a labs business that the DAO sort of contracts work to, and the foundation runs more like the it's more, I guess, like a service entity for the DAO. A lot of that is just corporate structuring to avoid a lot of risks.
Yeah, it's regulatory arbitrage.
Yeah, and in the end, it doesn't. I don't even think it actually helps you with the risks, because they're all still getting people coming after them, and it makes managing the entity a nightmare, because like now you can't make decisions, and you have a lot of this sort of governance theater where instead of directly doing the thing you want to do, you telegram your investor and say, hey, can you make this proposal that we want to do? And then they do a proposal, and then everybody, like, I guess the insiders vote on their proposal, and then it gets it's like this governance theater kind of nonsense that makes everything kind of more difficult, slower at a time when you actually want to be fast and nimble. So I really don't like the sort of the standard model of the governance, the DAO governance structure that has become popular. I think whether what we're doing is going to work out, we'll see. But I think alternatives are needed. So yeah, that's my view.
I love your rant. I fully agree. I think this NFT model is interesting because I think one big issue of DAO governance now is this kind of one token, one vote model that it just creates a plutocracy, and it's just like very concentrated voting power. So what's interesting about this is you get one NFT for all of the ETH you stake.
Well, yeah, and you're not dumping on retail. There's none of this like airdrop farming, mercenary capital that's there for like 5 minutes to collect the airdrop and then dump it on, whoever the next person is that buys the token. There's so many bad dynamics that happen when you just do a governance token. Then your Discord, your community is just all they care about is like, what are you doing to pump the token? And so that deflects your attention as a product, as a business, to focusing on that rather than focusing on the thing that you should be doing, which is building a product that customers actually want. So I really hated that. I was like, this is just a bad way to run a product. So we were looking for alternatives, and this, I think, maybe I'm totally wrong, I don't know, but this doesn't seem to have those drawbacks, because the NFT is designed to be deliberately like not speculative or less speculative, and it creates this distribution where like it's not insider controlled in a sense, and the management team actually retains the ability, explicit ability, to do what they need to do rather than having to do a governance vote every time. So I don't know. We'll see if it works.
Are there incentives for people to not split their ETH stakes in kind of many different deposits to just like get tons of NFTs and increase their voting power that way?
I mean, for sure they can. We haven't settled on this yet, so I'm kind of sort of speaking out of turn, but your vote is proportional to your stake. It's proportional to what you bring to the protocol. It's not just you can have 1 million NFTs, but that doesn't necessarily give you more power. In fact, it makes it, I guess, more expensive for you to vote. So that I don't think that actually helps you minting lots of NFTs, unless you want to speculate on them, I guess. But then the other aspect is I think the management team needs to retain I don't know exactly how we're going to structure this, but the management team needs to be able to retain control. You don't want just arbitrary votes sort of, passing and pushing in a direction that doesn't, make a lot of sense. And I think there's various ways to achieve that that we're thinking about.
So you still haven't defined exactly how the management team is able to make decisions quickly.
Yeah, we're thinking about it.
The IPOR protocol is the top interest rate derivatives DeFi protocol by TVL on DeFi Llama. IPOR aims to provide lenders with the best stablecoin yields in the industry with no impermanent loss. Traders can hedge, arbitrage, or speculate on interest rates on-chain. IPOR v2 is expanding on that vision to become the credit hub of DeFi and enable borrowers to take the largest loans, and lenders can fix their yield at the best fixed rates in DeFi. IPOR v2 is launching in Q3. Deposit stables or trade rates on app.ipor.io and become part of the future of DeFi. Sorry if this is an uncomfortable question, but I mean, it's just so much the focus right now, regulation. Mm-hmm. And what you're doing does seem, just pretty risky. There's a centralized entity that's, people are investing in this and expecting profit. You're going to be distributing protocol profits through kind of NFT holders. So, you're not taking any of this governance theater, which is great. But by not doing that, you're also, running, I think, it's a bit risky. So I don't know, how are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so I think you said a couple of things there that are important. One, I don't think the sort of structuring games that people are playing are really much of a protection. I think the main thing that we're doing that gives us some comfort is we're not we are blocking and taking significant steps to prevent U.S. and Canadian customers from using the protocol. So that's one thing where we don't know what's going on with our regulatory regime, so our choice is just not to have people there participate. We're taking more steps than any protocol I know of to do that. We don't have a governance token, so we're not distributing anything that could be claimed to be a security. These NFTs are staked ETH. We're not selling them. We're not raising money using them. We're not raising money for the business. We raise money through equity, just a standard venture capital equity offering. We're not raising money through these tokens. They're just staked ETH, just simple staked ETH with a membership, loyalty program around it, which and the membership points are not tradable, whatever. So I think we're taking as many steps as we can to, first of all, do the right thing for the business, and second of all, to stay away from the sketchiest areas, because I think where people really get in trouble is when they try to skirt the lines. When you're, I almost don't want to throw shade. I guess I'll just be very general. When you're launching something that could credibly be described as a security, but you're applying all this theater to make it seem like it's not, and you're raising money through it, and then effectively, whether you say so or not, your investors are dumping on those tokens on retail and et cetera, et cetera. It's not surprising that people come after you. You can, and I would certainly complain whether the regulations make sense, whether they're protecting anyone, but you're clearly, if you're doing that, swimming in sort of risky waters. So we're just avoiding the whole thing. Again, no governance token, not raising money through it, blocking US. What else can we do? We're a non-US company. We're based in Cayman. So I don't know, but if we're not doing enough, I don't know what. Then basically, no crypto allowed is the only verdict. If what we're doing is not allowed.
I mean, it's just such complicated times. Coinbase was supposedly also trying to do everything right.
Well, that's right. Yeah, it's sort of I think you'd have to be pretty naive to look at what's happening in the U.S., especially from a regulatory standpoint, and say, "Oh yeah, no, they're doing it because they're trying to protect investors." That's not what's happening there. I'm not a political person, but I think what happened is SBF was a big donor and, created some really bad press for people. And so now they need to sort of over-index on the other side. And I got to believe that's a big, big motivating driver there.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, there's so many theories to like the whys the SEC and Gensler are having this attitude. There's people are saying it's the financial lobby. People are saying kind of it's the U.S. doesn't want competition for its CBDC. There's kind of maybe Gensler's political aspirations. He's being controlled by Elizabeth Warren. Like so many theories as to why he's doing what he's doing. But in the end, like we can't know. We just know that it's certainly not protecting investors, and it's driving out such an important industry from the U.S. Like you guys, you're creating like such interesting, innovative products, trying to bring more, alternatives to Ethereum staking and liquid staking. But unfortunately, like U.S. Residents, investors in the U.S. aren't gonna be able to access it. That's kind of the state that we're in.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think a much more rational explanation, whatever the reason happens to be, is a more of like bottoms up kind of view where like every individual actor in the system is just doing the thing that is trying to maximize their own interest of whatever they perceive that to be. I don't tend to believe like the big macro sort of conspiracies that like the U.S. is being really strategic about protecting its, reserve status and issue. I just don't think they're operating cohesively enough to actually be having those types of motivations. I really think it's just a bunch of individual actors trying to, protect their political career or whatever, advance it. And that's probably the larger explanation of how this kind of emergent behavior, arises.
Yeah, no, but it's a shame to hear that, projects like yours are pretty much forced to leave out such a huge market.
Yeah, and it was not like in most ways, like it wasn't a hard decision. It was just obviously the right thing to do. Like the idea of starting the company in the US was just like, you'd have to be out of your mind to start a crypto. I mean, yeah, you shouldn't start if you're starting a crypto company, don't do it in the US. You'd really have to be kind of crazy to do that right now. And the idea of like not allowing US customers in, again, it wasn't like a hard decision. It was just like, well, obviously we have to do that. Like it's just the right thing to do. So, I do think it's driving a lot of innovation abroad, and that, there's a lot of elements like that in the U.S. that are going to be sort of headwinds for the economy.
Yeah, no, it's a shame. Hopefully we see that turn around. But to shift gears a little bit and to start wrapping up, I'd love to just, take a step back and hear your just bigger vision for Ethereum, for EtherFi. Like, where would you want to be in 10 years? What does the future look like?
Yeah, there's a lot of things I can't say. I think I'll say a couple of things. I think playing it forward 5 or 10 years, most ETH is going to be staked. I just think that makes sense. It'll become so safe that it's a non-issue. I think most of it is also going to be restaked, whatever form that takes. I think most of it will participate in other sort of layers, in other forms of validation than just Ethereum in itself. Our goal is to play a big role in that. We, at least internally, have adopted this sort of self-limiting guidelines that we will not take more than 22% of validators. So that's a commitment that we are making. If we end up launching a DAO, we'll codify that and make that explicit in our guidelines. We hope to play a big role in that, whether it's guiding or demonstrating other models for other protocols. But obviously, we're not gonna try to absorb more ETH than that. And then I do think that this is probably obvious or preaching to the choir here. I do think probably Ethereum. It could be some other smart contract platform, but let's say it's Ethereum. Will become sort of the default settlement layer of the world. I think that just feels inevitable as someone who has, unfortunately, I guess, dealt with a lot of the aspects of the current banking system. Both the pace of innovation, the complexity, the opacity, the rent-seeking elements, and every aspect, every layer of the system are so grotesque. And now, especially as it's becoming, capital controls are effectively going to be deployed, everywhere. I think so. It seems inevitable that value settlement will naturally tend towards smart contract platforms, which I think will accrue a lot of value to Ethereum. I think Ethereum is the clear leader in the smart contract platform space. And so for that reason, I think it's just, I would certainly bet on it at this point. So I think that's kind of my goal and forecast.
Awesome. I love it. Okay. And then last question is, how are you Defiant?
Oh man, I should have thought about this before I came on the, I think anybody that in this kind of climate and environment and uncertainty that choose to dedicate their professional life into in this space, in this category, it has to be Defiant to some degree, right? The easy money has been sort of turned off. It's not that people are able to mint tokens and get rich overnight just with funny money coming out of the Fed. I think at this point, from now to the next hopefully 5 or 10 years at least, you have to be building real products that provide real value to users in a space that is challenging, but has a tremendous amount of upside. So I think that myself and others who are still in the space are naturally kind of defined from that perspective.
Awesome. I love it. Mike, thank you so much for a really interesting conversation, and really excited to see everything that you're planning and shipping coming to life. So yeah, thanks again.
For sure. Thanks for having me.